Ladies and gentlemen, friends and families, graduates of the class of 2012, it is a great honor for all of us at High Point University to welcome on this momentous day a distinguished American, former First Lady, Laura Bush. We aim to inspire our students each year by bringing highly successful world-class thought leaders and speakers to our campus. This platform, as you know, over the last 7 years has hosted men and women of great esteem in politics, in law, in the arts, in the sciences, including Mayor Rudy Giuliani, Her Majesty Queen Noor, entertainer Bill Cosby, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, astronaut Buzz Aldrin, the chairman and CEO of Coca-Cola Worldwide, Mr. Mokhtar Kent, and 7-time Tour de France winner Lance Armstrong. This campus has also featured dozens of internationally known personalities like former Presidents George Bush and Bill Clinton, publisher Steve Forbes, authors Thomas Friedman and Malcolm Gladwell, baseball legend Cal Ripken, and countless more in all of the academic disciplines and all of the special seminars that we hold for our students. And today it is my honor to present to you Mrs. Laura Bush. Mrs. Bush was born in Midland, Texas. She was the only child of a loan company branch manager and bookkeeper. She is a lifelong Methodist. She attended Southern Methodist University. Upon graduating with a bachelor's degree in elementary education, she taught second grade at Kennedy Elementary School in Houston. After 2 years, she returned to school to earn her master's degree in library science. She then returned to Houston to work as a school librarian, a job she held until her marriage to former President George W. Bush. During her husband's tenure as governor of Texas, Mrs. Bush lobbied successfully for state funding of literacy, of early reading, and early childhood development programs. Having been an educator herself, these 3 issues were at the forefront of her focus as First Lady and have remained as important to her now as they were during her time in the White House. It was, in fact, during her time as First Lady of Texas that she founded the annual Texas Book Festival, which effectively raised substantial funds for the purchase of books throughout the state's public library system. The success of the Texas Book Festival inspired Mrs. Bush to implement that same model in the creation of the National Book Festival in Washington, D.C., once her husband was elected president. In her role as First Lady of the United States of America, Mrs. Bush convened a White House summit on early childhood cognitive development and created Ready to Read, Ready to Learn, a national initiative to inform parents and policymakers of early childhood education and to raise awareness of innovative teaching training methods. While her true passion has always been education, Mrs. Bush has used her spotlight to highlight global health initiatives and the problems faced by at-risk youth. She has traveled to all 50 states and to more than 75 countries. 5 of these trips alone were to Africa to support the President's Malaria Initiative and the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. Mrs. Bush, please allow me on this morning to introduce to you some 240 outstanding faculty members and administrators who commit themselves every day to ensure that this is an extraordinary university. Let me introduce to you, if I may, some 800 graduates who have labored tirelessly and diligently to arrive at this milestone in their lives. And then I give you thousands more, friends and family members, trustees and alumni who have gathered here to celebrate our graduates' achievements and to hear your message. We welcome you, Mrs. Bush, to campus, this campus of High Point University. We commend your dedication to the advancement of education and learning worldwide. Dear graduates, parents, students, and friends, please welcome an outstanding advocate of excellence both in and outside the classroom, our featured speaker, former First Lady of the United States of America, Mrs. Laura Bush.
Thank you very much for the very lovely introduction. Thank you very much. Thank you, all of you, and thank you, Dr. Cobain, for that very nice introduction. Thanks, everybody. Thank you all. Megan, thank you for your thoughtful remarks on behalf of your class, and congratulations to you. Congratulations to the two distinguished faculty members, Professor Shore and Professor Simpson, for the awards that you received today. Thank you to all of the distinguished faculty, to the Board of Trustees, the alumni, the parents, and the families for your very warm welcome. Most of all, thank you and congratulations to the High Point University class of 2012. I'm thrilled to be with you for this very happy day. Members of the class of 2012, you represent nearly 75 different majors, 14 states, and 6 countries. But tomorrow you'll be unified by one distinction. You'll all be graduates of High Point University. And that's an accomplishment worthy of celebration. You can see it in the faces of your parents. They're happy and they're proud of you. And we congratulate your parents and families and teachers whose love and support brought you to this happy day. One thing I've learned from being a parent is that it's irresistible for people my age to offer advice, and it's impossible for people your age to pay any attention to it. So I promise I'll tread lightly today, and I won't lecture you about what you should do with your lives after graduation. Besides, if your life turns out anything like mine, it won't go exactly according to plan, and that's a good thing. As I reflected on what to say to you, I remembered my own graduation from SMU in 1968. It was the height of the civil rights movement. Young people were questioning the values of their elders, and the United States was struggling against the spread of communism. Today, the Cold War is long over. We've elected an African American as President of the United States, and there are more democracies in the world than ever before, many of those former communist countries. Though you can't know what the coming years will bring, I assure you that they'll bring progress and change, and that you'll be a part of it, just as my class of 1968 was part of what's occurred over the last 40 years. The commencement speaker at my graduation was Dr. Willis Tate, president of SMU, and he probably called us to greatness, but I don't remember much of what he said. I just remember how I felt. Relieved that finals were finally over, excited to embark on the next adventure, and impatient for him to finish. So then I reflected on the speech when I received my master's degree. I couldn't recall who gave that commencement address. That's because I skipped the ceremony. But I did look it up, and you can imagine my surprise when I discovered it was some guy named George Bush. 4 years after that speech, I married his son. In 40 years, you may not remember who spoke at your graduation, but I know you'll have many memories of your time at High Point University. Even as you go to new places, you'll discover that you never truly leave a place that you love. And no matter where you go or how long it's been since your graduation, returning to this place will feel like coming home. One of our nation's first presidents, John Adams, knew that education was vital for the development of our country and for the development of our character. He once said, "There are 2 educations. One should teach us how to make a living, and the other should teach us how to live." Since its founding in 1924, High Point University has taught students both. When the doors opened to High Point College, 122 students attended classes taught by 9 faculty members in just 3 buildings. Today, more than 4,000 students learn from several hundred faculty members in 40 buildings all across this gorgeous campus. Many things have changed over the last century, but the core values that guide this school have not. High Point University remains dedicated to giving students an extraordinary education that prepares them to live lives of significance in our increasingly global world. Class of 2012, your 4 years of college are short in the scope of your whole life, but what you learn here will be influential for the rest of your life. During your time at High Point, you learn from your academic discoveries, from your disappointments and your triumphs, and from the friends you cherish. Some of the first people you met during orientation 4 years ago are now your best friends, and they'll be your best friends long after you leave. The friends I met in college are still some of my best friends today. Some of the most important lessons, the ones that will guide you through life, are less tangible. Maybe it was something that was said during first year seminar, or an especially compelling professor. Or maybe it was what you saw while serving overseas in a High Point's alternative break program. Whatever it is, you know you've matured since those first days of orientation 4 years ago. And the next chapter of your life has been shaped by the time here at High Point University. I can trace much of my life's work to my college experiences. I remember many of my favorite professors, including my favorite literature professor, Dr. Harriet Earhart, who's still a friend of mine. Her children's literature class inspired me to become a librarian. The books I read in her class, I later read to children in my own classrooms, and to children in the classrooms I've visited across our country and around the world. When I graduated from SMU, I wanted to do what I could for the civil rights movement. So I requested to teach in an inner-city minority school. I wanted to work with children who'd been left out and too often left behind simply because of the color of their skin. But I wasn't prepared for the poverty I encountered in an inner-city Houston school. Most of the students lived on narrow side streets behind the school building. Some were hungry, and they would come to school in the morning with their bellies rumbling and ravenously attack the free breakfast and lunch that we gave them. I wanted to help those children so badly, to reach into their lives and somehow make a difference, but it was an uphill fight. Before I left my job in Houston to go to graduate school, I invited a few of my favorite students to Astro World, an amusement park near the old Houston baseball stadium. I called their parents and I coordinated a date for the trip. That day, we picked up several eager kids, but when we came to the last house, the little boy who was supposed to go with us opened the door in his underwear. Though we could hear his mother in the back of the house, she never came to the door to allow him to come with us, and so we had no choice but to leave him there. All I could do was give him a goodbye hug with an extra squeeze and leave him there standing, watching us all drive off to Astro World without him. As much as any generation of Americans, the class of 2012 is tasked with resolving challenges that lie far beyond your doorsteps, even far beyond America's borders. Between cell phones and the internet, there's a world of information literally at our fingertips. And because our world is so small, we can't ignore the earthquakes in Japan or Indonesia, or the suffering of AIDS patients in Africa. For you, today begins a period of incredible liberty and adventure, a time to find your calling and demand the most from life before life makes specific demands on you. And as you face this new chapter of your life, I can tell you one thing for certain. You won't waste your talents and education if you use them to help people. A very wise man, my father-in-law, President Bush, said, "Any definition of a successful life must include service to others." That principle has governed not only his life, but his children's and grandchildren's as well. In his 2002 State of the Union address, my husband, President George W. Bush, asked every American to dedicate 2 years or 4,000 hours over the rest of their lives to help their neighbors in need. The class of 2012 has already answered that call in significant ways, and you know that service and civic involvement are central to the lessons that you learned here at High Point. High Point students volunteer more than 30,000 hours each year. And last year, you raised more than $100,000 for local, national, and international causes. These funds are helping to build homes for Habitat for Humanity and raising awareness about diabetes. And by thinking pink, you've contributed funds to find a cure for breast cancer. Many of you participated annually in alternative break trips to help those in need here at home and abroad. This year, you spent your break helping people in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, rebuild from the devastating tornadoes. You provided clean drinking water to families in Guatemala, and you worked with deaf students in Nicaragua. All year long, you tutored students in after-school programs, and you distributed food and clothing to the homeless. You hosted blood drives to help hundreds of people in need. And now as you leave High Point University, you'll find that there's so many needs to be met and so many more ways you can help. You may choose to work in the healthcare field. You may choose to serve in uniform in the military or out of uniform with the Peace Corps. Or you may choose to run for public office to serve your local community or state or country. Many of you, 14% of you, have already chosen to serve by pursuing careers in education, thanks to each of you who've chosen to teach. You'll find teaching to be one of the most challenging jobs, but I know you'll also find it to be one of the most rewarding. The great American historian and writer Henry Adams once wrote, "A teacher affects eternity. He could never tell where his influence stops." That's a weighty responsibility, but it's one of the best parts about teaching, being surprised by the effect you have on your students. Sometimes the child everyone in town has pegged as a lifelong jokester goes on to do something great, thanks to his teachers. He might even become President of the United States. Over the years, I've often wondered what became of that little 9-year-old boy in Houston who didn't get to go to Astro World. He'd be in his 50s now. What happened to him, I ask myself sometimes. Is he still alive? Did he manage to escape that dilapidated house in Houston with the mother who wouldn't come to the door? Did he find another teacher who cared about him? Did he graduate from high school or even college and find a job where he was valued? Is he standing in an airport right now, a proud father, anxiously waiting for the plane that will bring his son or daughter home at last from Afghanistan? Or is he standing instead by the highway with a cardboard sign, or sitting by himself in a joyless, empty room, wondering how it all turned out this way? So as you leave High Point University, whether you plan to teach or pursue another path of service, my challenge to you is really the same challenge I've given myself: to never forget that little boy. To never forget that one trip to Astro World, one reading lesson, one consoling touch, one friendly smile, one check written, or one busy hour given to someone who needs you. These are the things that quite literally can make all the difference in the world. And whatever you choose to do, don't be afraid to take a risk or change course. When George and I started out in Midland, Texas, we were ready for a nice, quiet, normal life. 5 years later, we had twins. 10 years later, we were living in Washington, D.C., helping George's father get elected president. 15 years later, we were in Dallas, where George was running the Texas Rangers baseball team. 20 years later, we were in Austin, when George was governor. 25 years later, we were in the White House, in a nation changed by the attacks of September 11th. 30 years later, we were finishing a second term. For number 35, we planned to be in Dallas, but you never know. It wasn't the life we expected, but the twists and turns along the way gave it meaning and richness and value. I know the same will be true for you. Congratulations to each one of you. Thank you for giving me this chance to share this special day with you. May God bless the class of 2012.
You customized it so well for this university. Thank you very much.